Hey, I'm Rafael. I'm at the Pingree Center. I'm the clinical manager here at a BCBA.
Part of the reason why we wanted to talk with you is July is Minority Mental Health Awareness Month. One of the things that I think is interesting is how many folks actually live in populations that don't traditionally see much help with mental health care. What has your experience been with that? What have you experienced or seen in that in your lifetime or in your experience as a therapist?
Yeah, it's funny. I feel like I talk about this a lot because it's the reason I got into the field is really I had a lot of cousins, maybe not a lot, but a couple of cousins that had something different about them, something that I could tell was different than me and my other cousins. And I never knew what it was, never knew why it was. I would ask my parents and they'd say, oh, they're just different. Or my least favorite part was, oh, they're just sick. And really now looking back at it, it was some form of either autism or some other disorder. So really wishing that there was that advocacy to teach people about it. I never learned about it in school. I never learned about it anywhere. It was really just getting into this field, getting into jobs that pertained with school and having some kids that had autism. That's how I learned about it. So yeah, it's really unfortunate that in families, in me particularly in the Latino community, it's just talked about as a secret thing. We don't want to talk about it. It's just something that's different about them, but let's not bring it up. There's nice parts where they're treated very equally, but it's really just let's avoid it at all costs.
So what do you think people want to avoid it?
Yeah, I think it's just easier that way. I think if they had had that conversation, they would have had to explain why this is so really sad for the families that they have to deal with these barriers that these other families don't. So I remember specifically I had a cousin, now that I'm looking back, definitely autism, but there was just things where they'd have behaviors randomly. If something didn't go their way, if something changed, let's say at a party, if there was a loud noise, they would either scratch the kid next to them, they'd go running away, whatever it may be. So I think they just rather not talk about it just because they felt maybe that embarrassment. Oh, my kid's different than this other kid. And yeah, it's just really unfortunate that instead of having a conversation and saying, oh, this is why they're different, let's help them out, I always felt like, oh, they're different, I should probably stay away just in case something happens.
I hear people who are exposed to folks with autism who say, oh, why do we suddenly have so much autism? And there's also another camp that says, well, we probably always have, we just didn't have the language or the understanding of it. Do you think that's somewhat the case in what you were experiencing in your lifetime?
Yeah, I think anecdotally that totally explains it. Is I had all these cousins, they were in normal classrooms, they were in normal schools, but I knew there was something different. And I'm sure if it was today, they'd be in a special ed classroom. So I can at least think of 5 kids in my family that had autism or some sort of disorder like that, and they would have been diagnosed. So it's there, it's prevalent, it's just nobody caught it.
Some cultures have an emphasis on pride. We don't talk about things, or we're too proud to discuss those issues. Do you feel like that is a barrier for some communities?
Yeah, I definitely, thinking of the Latino community, it happens a lot. I think a lot of it is, I don't want to ask for help. I feel like I should be able to handle this on my own. I'll keep this with the family, and whatever I've got to do to kind of contain it without anyone knowing, that's what's going to happen. And really seeing families here, I think that's the biggest thing, is that they've never asked for help. They've always tried to do it, but once they feel comfortable with somebody, it all comes out. I always think of this same kind of scenario where I've got a new family that speaks Spanish. They've been in whatever center or community they've been in for years, and just one day of hanging out with me and talking to me and having that opportunity to talk to somebody they feel is an expert, they're like, oh, what's autism? What is the service they're doing? What are these things? These questions that probably would have been answered if they were English speaking or just felt more comfortable asking somebody around them. But since they haven't, they're like, all right, can I talk to you for 2 hours about every question I've ever had about this kid? So it's really sad to hear, but it's the reality of it.
Do you feel like the education resources are available for the Latino community?
I mean, there's always translations of things in Spanish, but it's not the same of being able to see a document that's been translated and maybe isn't in the same language or tone that they're used to. And a lot of the people maybe that are undocumented that came here that don't have the same education, those documents just aren't really relevant to them. So I think having that personal aspect, having that therapist there, that's just not as available, especially here in Utah.
In Utah, in particular, we actually have a lot of Spanish-speaking folks here because they maybe went on a mission to a Latin-speaking community or a Spanish-speaking community. But it isn't the same because it's not the same culture, it's not the same background.
Exactly, yeah. Anecdotally, at a center I used to work at, we had 2 BCBAs, which is what I do now, that spoke Spanish. They did their mission and they worked with the clients that I worked with as an RBT. They were like, yeah, I think they get it. They totally understood what I said. And then I'd go speak to the family and they'd be like, we just said yes because we wanted to get it over with, but we had no idea what she was talking about. Really, it was just an explanation of scientific things as well as they could talk about. But once you add that cultural part, just them understanding that I knew like, oh, family members aren't going to be happy knowing about this autism thing, keeping it a secret that they're going to services. I feel like once they had that buy-in from me, knowing that I know that feeling, they were more willing to tell me things.
What can we do to turn that around? Because it is a matter of populations that are classically underserved for a large part because of that lack of maybe relatability.
Yeah, I think it could go 2 ways. You can either try to be as effective as you can as a therapist with those limitations. So doing learnings, talking to people that are in that community, trying to learn as much about that culture as you can and use that to your benefit and try to connect with them. But honestly, once it comes to just cultural significance, unless you look like them, you act like them, you speak like them, they're not going to feel comfortable. So being able to connect them to people that are in that culture. I know like Polynesian, we have an employee here that's actually connected to the like Islander community and can connect you to other people that they can talk to. So even if it's not a therapist, at least they have a community of people that have talked about those things and can talk to them about those things. So whether it be Latino, Islander, whatever it may be, there's got to be a center for them for them to feel comfortable.
So there is hope.
Yes, exactly. There's always communities there. It's really just us as therapists knowing that we have to do the extra work to find those communities for our clients.
And those resources are out there, and it's just a matter of us becoming educated enough to be able to help folks make those connections.
Exactly. We can always learn, so hopefully we're just finding ways to learn more and more each time.
Awesome. Rafael, thank you.
Thank you.